Now this right here was a vehicle that we fixed right here, and we worked on, and it was a sort of a surprise, but there was a lesson here that I had learned, basically. This guy came in, he had his Pontiac Grand Prix with that little 2.8 in it, which is just like the, you know, the V6s in the Pontiac, some small white block engines. Had a long valve on it, and it had a scraping noise with the engine running. Okay, so the scraping noise that he had was the, you know, that cup-shaped pulley on that pump was actually dragging on the metal, the housing of the timing cover, because the bearings were gone in the water pump. Okay, so it was making that ugly sound and everything. He had no other issues except for this noise. Think about that now. Nothing else was going on except the noise, right? All right, so the guy gets the water pump off, takes a look at the timing cover because it spins next to the machine surface. And there was a little scoring where the cast iron impeller on that water pump pulley had contacted it, but it still looked serviceable. So we went ahead and put the the water pump in there, which the water pump on that one is right up on the top. It's easy to get to. You can change a water pump on one of these cars in like 15 minutes, which is real simple. So the coolant takes a little longer. A few minutes later, the new pump was in place, and the belt and pulley were installed, and these engines have got a little air-bound issue. That's why they got bleeders on them. Whenever you're filling an engine up with coolant, make darn sure that if it's got bleeders, that you appropriate the bleeders. And what the bleeders do, you loosen the bleeders typically, and you pour the coolant in until the coolant is pushed all the air out of the block and it's coming out the bleeders, and you tighten them up. You don't use the bleeders while the engine's running, or you just use it when you're pouring coolant in there. Make sure if it's got bleeders, you're aware of it. Because if it don't, and you remember what I told you about the Pathfinder, if you gotta, when you gotta put that motor in that Pathfinder, where you'll have to jack the, to fill it up with coolant, you gotta jack the Pathfinder way up in the front, because all the air will come up to the, top. If you don't, you won't ever get it all out of there. And that Pathfinder's a peculiar deal anyway. All right, so we took the heater hose next to the water pump and poured a block full of coolant. What we do, I like to take a heater hose off, and I know it's in there, going into the top part of the air cavity in the block. And sometimes I'll use a little funnel or something, and I just pour coolant in there, holding that hose up until it fills all the way up. If you can do that, that works really well. You can't do it on every vehicle, but on that one, particular one, we did that. Didn't want any trapped air in it, so I felt it overheat, trying to make sure everything's okay. So I came walking back in the shop just as we were warming it up, waiting for the thermostat to open. So how do you know when the thermostat's open?
Water's down that water spout, that comes back in the thermostat back to the radiator, it should be hot.
Yep. Or you basically, if you hold the hose, it comes out of the thermostat, you can tell.
Yeah.
Right. And or how would I look at a scan tool and tell? What does the coolant do on a scan tool? What does the coolant temperature do when you're looking at the engine coolant on a scan tool? Just select that and nothing else, so you have a good high resolution reading. What are you going to see on the scan tool?
Just get higher and higher.
And then it'll drop. And then it'll go back up, and then it'll drop, it'll go back up. Also, your coolant fan, if it's got an electric coolant fan, will kick on and off, on and off. Now what happens if you're watching your coolant on a scan tool, and the coolant fan kicks on and stays on, and it keeps getting hotter and hotter? You still have a problem. Did you get it hooked up?
No, no one ain't been here yet.
Did you stay dry?
Partially.
What? It's overheating. Now it's overheating. It wasn't overheating before. We put a new water pump on it, or a rebuilt one, or whatever. Put it on there, and now it's overheating. Did we cause that? Well, it overheated before, but now it is. Can you think of anything? Yeah. All right, parts girl, you're supposed to know. Overheated traffic light. Sometimes you'll say that. It overheated before we changed the water pump. Now, in other words, he came back and said it was trying to overheat. Looked at my watch. It was almost time to knock off, so I went back to money. So the high light came on when I stopped at traffic light, but it always went off when I was driving. This is the first car I've ever owned. There's no temp gauge, so the light's the only way I can monitor the temperature. All right. So when the light comes on, it's almost too late. I think, golly, it get too hot. So because even had the fortitude to do it. Because it's a pretty tough little engine right there. The steam escaping from the thermostat didn't smell like blown head gasket. What does a blown head gasket smell like? You smelled one, hadn't you? Stinky sweet smell. And it's punching water out. While it's sitting there running. The funny thing about that, when we got that Bronco, the guy said it had a blown head gasket, so he donated it to the school. And it would run for a while, and it would start, you know, it was sounded like it was kind of skipping. It wasn't quite running right, but it was running almost right, but it would start punching the coolant out. And you know what I found out was going on with that one? He had it wired up like a 302, and it was a 5.8. That was the only thing wrong with it. In other words, he wired it up 15426.378. It's supposed to be 13726.548. That'll be on a pop test tomorrow. Okay. All right. But it was percolating like a Model 8. So anybody that's familiar with these timing covers would expect to see this smooth, slightly raised surface instead of this machined, indented surface on the bad cover. See, this thing right here had a cast iron impeller, and because the bearings were worn out, it got in there too close and it chewed away some of the metal. And so what we had, I remembered, as I was thinking about this, back in when I was working at Lincoln Mercury in 1984, this guy had this little Plymouth Volare, like the one you see in the picture there, and he was a bookkeeper in the office and everything, and so I had a whole water pump, you know, the seal was leaking and all that, and so I got it, and we ordered a water pump from the parts house, and it was a little slant 6, and I popped it in there. And he came back and he said, my car's running hotter than it was before. Well, it had been running down, you know, kind of just above the cold line, which is where he wanted to see it, but now it was up in the middle. He said, I don't like it before. I said, well, it's full of coolant and everything. So anyway, he was insistent, he didn't like that. So I pulled the water pump off of it. And on that particular one, there's two different types of water pumps, the way they're put together. Basically two basic different kinds of water pumps. One of them has the impeller pointed at the timing cover, and the other one has the impeller pointed at the pump. You know, the blades of the impeller, there's some water pumps up there behind Nick. But anyway, so what I did was when I pulled the water pump off and I looked at it, I was noticing a gap that looked a little bit wider than it should. It wasn't anything that would jump out and grab you, but I said, that looks a little bit like too much of a gap. So I got him to order another pump from the parts house, and there was about 50 thousandths of an inch difference between the first water pump I put on and the second one he sent. When I put the second water pump on, it ran cool. What's that phone good in your hand for? All right. Well, the next day he showed me that temperature gauge. I test drove it and run between midway point and hotline, which wasn't gonna really hurt it, but he didn't like it running that hot. All right, so what happened was when they rebuilt the pump, they pressed that impeller onto that shaft, and they didn't press it on there far enough. That's what the problem was. All right, so it was the difference. There was 70 thousandths of an inch from when I measured it with feeler gauges. You had to stack them to get that much. 20 thousandths of an inch on the old pump and on the replacement pump that was better than this first replacement pump. All right, now this is something right here that will also happen in a situation where the water pump has been consumed partially by rust. Now right over here behind Nick somewhere, this is a water pump right here that has been destroyed by rust, and there's too much space in between that impeller. Pass that around. Look at it. Now the way we found that particular one there, that one came off of a Ford Taurus. It wasn't running hot, but she was complaining that she had no heat. So you know how the rust has eaten away that impeller? That happens when somebody don't keep their coolant changed, or if you got a bad radiator cap and it's just letting air come and go. It's just going to make a big, terrible mess of the cooling system. Long and short of it was, she said, I've got no heat. So what we did is we put a clear hose in the line between the two heater hoses, and we cranked it up, and there was no coolant traveling through there. The water pump's what pushes that. Okay? She's holding that up. All right there. So, this was going through my mind the whole time we were troubleshooting the Pontiac. And so, I didn't really frame of reference. That looked just fine at first glance, but I got the worn out part, had too much space there. So I got a feeler gauge, and I don't know how accurate this would be, but I did notice that this one here, when I got another timing cover off of an old engine that we had back there that was the same kind of motor, look at the difference in that. See how much thinner that one it was ground off was, and that one further, that was smooth, and that was kind of chewed up. But the water had lubricated that thing while it was machining it to the point where it really didn't look that bad. All right, so I used a hacksaw on the old timing cover and put a good water pump on it, and you could see all that space in there. Now, What is the difference between a positive displacement pump and a pump that's not positive displacement?
Different displacements,
Huh?
different displacements.
No, it's not that. Positive displacement means if you turn that pump, something's going somewhere. And if you stop whatever it is going, the pump will stop. Got it? You understand what I'm saying? This right here is like a windshield washer pump. Now, if I take a windshield washer pump and I put my thumb over the hoses, and the hose coming right out of the windshield washer pump will still spin. It'll just cavitate, right? Something else you might want to look for is if you see a situation where the pump is made out of some kind of metal that will cavitate and get little dimples, you know, places where there's little dimples, you know, eat out of here by electrolysis or something, so that the this doesn't have enough. It's got to be really close. That's the point, and it can't be any imperfections in it. Anyway, but that one right there was a good one to keep. May not seem like much, but it made a big difference with the pump spinning and the coolant flowing. Riding on good bearings, the new impeller was whirling in the damaged timing cover with about, you know, well, I had 1/8 of an inch, which was, but with the new timing cover, it was a heck of a lot closer than that. That was the point. Now, the ones that teach us the most are typically the ones that smacks around. The ones that you had trouble figuring out. Now, y'all are getting the sugar out of the, that girl brought her Armada in here, somebody put sugar in the gas tank. And all, and it was nasty about it. And after you got the sugar out of the gas tank, how much you get out of the gas tank?
About a cup.
About a cup of sugar out of it. Now, sugar won't dissolve in gas, so all it does is clog up the filters, right? So anyway, but she was saying that she couldn't get about half a tank of gas in there, and it was clicking off, but that was because sugar that they had poured in there was clogging up the pipe going in.
And that was a lot of gas in that tank though. You said, y'all act like there wasn't much in there yesterday.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, the long and the short of it was, it's hard to tell when it's balancing on that jack, but long
It was
and
a lot.
but I will tell you something else. You can't hit that tank and tell what's in it. I can't hit a gas tank and tell if it's got gas in it or not. It's not like water.
She wasted all that money selling that, because you know, that had to cost her a little good bit of money.
Well, not necessarily. What we would do is filter all that sugar out. She can still use the gas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it doesn't dissolve.
So we're jumping
Put
the
some
gas
gasoline, put some sugar and gasoline in a fruit jar and shake it around. It just settles to the bottom. It don't even dissolve. It ain't like water. All right, number one question. Customer with a Nissan Stanza said she can start her cold engine, let it run for 30 seconds, shut it off, and when she removes the radiator cap, she hears pressure escaping. Been sitting all night. She starts it for 30 seconds, switches it off, takes the cap off, there's pressure. What does that mean? It makes pressure in the cooling system within 30 seconds after starting it when it's been sitting all night. Come on.
Intake gasket.
Huh?
Oh, she went in dark there.
Where would pressure come from that quick in the cooling system?
Thermostat,
Radiator cap.
No. The radiator cap's trapping the pressure, but the pressure's coming in there from somewhere. Where's it coming from? Ma'am?
Head gasket.
Head gasket. Listen to Sierra. We got head gasket issues. Now, how many different ways can head gaskets blow? Do they always blow the same way?
Nope.
Sometimes they blow between two cylinders. Sometimes they leak oil if it's an overhead cam engine and it's got all the camshaft, you know, where it's spinning in its saddles. If it's not overhead cam, it won't leak oil from under the head, typically. It can leak coolant from under the head, but it can leak coolant into the cylinder. It can leak compression into the water. Now let me ask you this. How are you going to find it if it's leaking coolant in the cylinder, and what kind of symptom does that cause?
Smoke.
No, whenever it's leaking, well, it depends. If it's like this Dodge truck out here that's really getting a lot of coolant in there, you remember the one we started up over here, the guy brought over here? It's going to have an engine? Lots of coolant coming out there. The reason we're putting an engine in the Dodge truck is because the timing chain costs $500 something for a Dodge, for an engine like that. By the time, we don't know if he's got cracked heads or anything else. We may as well go ahead and just pop another motor in it instead of taking it down and then spending $1,800 putting the timing, you know, and all this other stuff on that motor there. But the long and short of it is, let's say a lot of the times you'll have one that will, whenever you park it and you go to get your bananas or something after you've driven it a long way, you come out of the parking lot, into the parking lot, you crank it up and it goes, and it's skipping for just a minute and then it clears up. Okay? Well, what do you do to find that? How do you find out what's wrong with that? That's what you're here to learn, right? Well, I was telling Nick the other day, you may want to do high performance stuff, but if you don't understand the regular motor stuff, You got no business fooling a high-performance engine unless you understand how the motor in Mama's minivan works. You got it? That's why we teach the, you know, the basic stuff about engines and all that. Okay, I'm gonna crank it up. I'm gonna shut it off while it's still skipping. I don't wait till it stops. If it's still skipping, I shut it off. Then I pull all the plugs out, and one of them will have steam boiling off of it. We got a head gasket issue. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, long and short of it is, this is the blown head gasket. Right there. So what if you find the steam coming off the plug, or if the plug looks rusty, like it's been really rusted, like it's been out there in the water, and then it's, you know, and it shouldn't look like that when it's been in the cylinder, should it? Sometimes you'll see little green stains on it where antifreeze has gone to it and cooked onto it. All that. Now, here's another thing. If it's skipping like that, and when you first start it and you pull it out and it's wet with gas, or it's really, really sooty, what does that mean? You got a dripping injector. So there's a couple of different things that can make you do that. Now, the owner of a 94 Ford Escort complains of a loud noise that happens intermittently and is accompanied by smoke from under the hood. He says these things only happen when he's at a traffic light and the climate controls are on AC or defrost. Because he probably has a radiator hose that leaks under extreme pressure. Technician B says AC pop-off releases an excessive refrigerant due to an inoperative engine cooling fan.
Technician B.
Huh?
Technician B.
That's gonna be a B. Usually it'll overheat, but sometimes it may not. But if it's on a hot day and you park it around and that head pressure gets up high enough, there's a pop-off valve on the compressor that will release extreme pressure. And I've seen that happen. And the problem with all of that is that you may pull it in your service bay and that fan may kick off and on repeatedly and never see it act up. But that's when you you know, like we did last semester, you pull the relay and you hook a test light, kind of like we were talking about. You go from the hot battery terminal into the part of the relay that goes out to the fan, and while that's there, I'm going to turn the fan, see if that light ever goes out. If it ever goes out, it's like a Russian roulette. When it stops, if it stops on that dark spot, that fan won't kick on. You know what I mean? I troubleshot one that was doing that on a tempo, and we wound up, you know, finding it that way. And then I started teaching people to do that. All right, customer brings a low mileage 2,000 mile Buick Park Avenue in for an overheating problem. This was a sort of an old situation that you're probably not going to encounter nowadays, but you can, and I'll tell you another little story in a minute that leads this way. Technician A says he thinks there's a TSB with instructions to use sandpaper on the radiator filler neck. Does that make any sense? Technician B says the thermostat's probably stuck. Which of these would be the most sensible first choice when diagnosing? There's a TSB. It says to use sandpaper on the radiator filler neck. Here's something else though. Dodge Caravan comes in here. We put a radiator in it. Okay, so she's driving it, and she says that it tends to want to percolate and push coolant out, and she winds up having to add coolant all the time. Now the coolant's not leaking from anywhere else, but it percolates. All right, so I took the radiator cap off, and I noticed it didn't take a lot of effort. You know, most of the time radiator caps, you gotta, you know, this one here is just real easy to take it off. And I got looking, and the way it was designed, and it came from Advance. It's one of those radiators like, there's nothing wrong with Advance. I'm not fussing about Advance, except now it takes Advance too long to get the parts there. But it came from Advance, and the good thing about Advance is it's a lifetime guarantee. So you know. Anyway, so I says this thing does not have enough pressure, so I got another radiator cap, and it was the same way. And I said the radiator wasn't quite made right for that cap. I mean, for that, you know, the outside seal that goes on the top. It wouldn't bite good enough. And so I got another radiator cap that I had with a good seal on it, and I fed it around there and put it underneath that seal to make that rubber seal about twice as thick. I said, let's just see what this does. And it never percolated because it had more pressure. I mean, it was able to hold more pressure. You see what I'm saying? That was an improperly built radiator. Is what that was. And so, but anyway, this one here is kind of interesting. That one there was talking about, this is a TSB, engine on running hot overheat, loss of coolant, polish radiator filler neck, and replace the radiator cap. was basically it had little, you know, casting imperfections in it, and they wanted that sanded away. Do not replace the radiator. They didn't want to pay for a radiator replacement under warranty because it's expensive. All right, technician A says if you disconnect the temperature gauge center feeding the magnetic temperature gauge, the gauge will go to the hot side of the gauge. Technician B says if you ground the temp gauge cinder wire, the gauge will go to the cold side of the gauge. Now how do you check that gauge? Well, sometimes my gauge ain't working right. This is a magnetic gauge is directly hooked to a cinder under the hood. Nowadays, a lot of them have got computers in the instrument cluster and stuff like that. But if you take that sending unit wire and you ground it, what are you going to see the gauge do? Where's it? What'd you do with your finger?
Down,
Down where? What does that mean?
cold.
Nope, it goes hot. Now, if you disconnect if you disconnect it, it goes cold. If you ground it, it goes hot. Now, on a gas gauge, typically, if you disconnect the gas gauge sending unit, it'll go past full. But if you ground it, it goes to empty. You need to know how that works when you're troubleshooting that. If somebody can't trust their temperature gauge, they don't know whether it's getting hot or not.
I know.
And it's always most of the time, you know, your truck is one of the old hot water motors anyway, but most of the time, whenever you got an engine that's trying to run too hot, like example, I don't know how many times I've seen people beside the road with a busted radiator, you know, plastic radiators, how they like a bust. You know, and sometimes somebody will come to me like this lady up front, she says, I've got this car that's got 275,000 miles on it. You know, what I need to do to get as many more miles of it out as I can. And one of the things I recommend is let's put a radiator in it. Because when it gets that many miles on it, and it's been hot under there that many times, that radiator is liable to split. And if it splits the wrong way or in the wrong place, you could be putting a motor in it. Or it could destroy it if it's got that many miles on it, because you're not going to put a motor in a high-mileage car like that anyway, not most of the time. But anyway, just make sure you understand how that thing works, and you can look a lot of times in your manual and tell you what the gauge is reading at this temperature versus that. Technician A says the temperature stamped on a thermostat is the temperature at which the thermostat should begin to open. B says removing an engine thermostat will usually make an engine run hot. Who's right? Huh?
If you run, technician B, if you remove thermostat, it won't run hot, it'll be cool.
You're right just about all the time. There are people I've run into though that will argue with you like you were a fence post and just tell you, oh no, it'll run hot if you take the thermostat out, which is stupid. But if it's an old car like some of these old Mustangs, like in the mid to late '60s, that had real thin radiators in them, the coolant wasn't spending enough time in the radiator to dump its heat if the thermostat wasn't in there. And sometimes one of those, you take a thermostat out of 550 cars, one of them might overheat, the rest of them grow too cold. If the thermostat sticks open, or if the spring gets weak and it opens too soon, if it's running too cold, the heater won't work. That ain't good for the motor, emissions are higher, all that kind of thing. Technician says, filling a coolant system is like pouring water in a bucket. Technician B says the vehicle should be run and the coolant level monitored, the coolant fan cycles until the thermostat's open and closed. Or both.
You're saying it too fast.
Yep. Let's look at technician A, is he right? Filling the coolant system is not like pouring water in a bucket, is it? You better let that thing run long enough where you make sure it's full. Well, there was a guy here that put a radiator in his own vehicle after hearing me say this over and over and over and over, and he was in such a big hurry, and he poured it in there and he could see the coolant. Hey, I'm good to go. It was like a GMC, something other, SUV or whatever, mid-90. Took off on it. Got out there somewhere and it started trying to overheat. And he was dingy enough with it trying to overheat that he took the radiator cap off. And it got coolant all over it. Be careful about that too. Squeeze the hose and see if it's tight before you pull the cap off. If the hose is tight, you don't pull the cap off. You got me? That's why some of them parts called lever vent caps, That way you're not going to get burned, and if you pop that lever vent, it'll release the pressure. But if you take that cap off, and it's, all these escorts and stuff, a lot of them like that now, they're just pointing away from you. It's pointing back, because they don't want you to get it. And, we took a radiator cap off an escort that came in here, they got sent a blown head gasket. When we took the cap off, and when we spun it over, it fire hoses that coolant out of there all over the back of the car. When you spin it over, whoosh, you know? But if it's pointing in the wrong direction, it's gonna get you. All right, that's the last slide. Anybody learn anything you didn't know before you came in here? You learned something, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, all right then. Nick was over turning into a skeleton. Usually Kayla's the one that turns into a skeleton. Today it was Nick. Is that right?
It's cold in here.
That keeps you awake.